Democracy is worth dying for. People are dying for democracy all around the world. So try to appreciate the systems that we have in Sweden. It's not about defending them, we need to advance them. And be realistic. Always demand the impossible. Always demand the impossible. If we have no people demanding the impossible, we will not move. We always need a horizon of the impossible in order to dream of a better world. Hello, my name is Nazem Tahvilzadeh. I'm an associate professor in political science and senior lecturer in public administration at Södertörn University. I'm here to talk about democracy, social justice, and the meaning of life.
Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica Podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica Podcast partner AFRY. AFRY is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it.
Today we have a new story and we have a new storyteller. I have the pleasure to welcome you, Nazem, to Urbanistica Podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Thank you very much.
How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm happy to see you. I listened to you at ATH, then at you did the presentation at AFRY panel, and now you're here finally. I have you for 2 hours. So how was your month or last 2 weeks?
As you all know, November is a tough month in Sweden. And now we also have a snow chaos on top of that with the urban infrastructure dismantling. So it's tough, but we are rough people, aren't we? So we keep on struggling.
So how was it to come to the office here? Was it easy? Struggling?
It was a bit struggling, yeah. First of all, because of the snow chaos, they canceled a lot of trains. So there are half train set, the Pendeltåg, the commuter trains here.
Yeah.
So basically people stood on each other. And you know, when Swedish people have to stand too close to each other.
It's like the worst thing ever.
They freak out, yeah. And then I tried to use Google Maps to walk to this office, and I ended up on a heavy traffic road with no pavement.
Oh, nice.
And I had to reroute. And what I actually thought about was how much investments have been placed here on urban planning without no sense of publicity or walk friendly or making a city that connects, different people and doing different things. It's very instrumental. That was a bit shocking, but I knew this from before, from the Solna kind of style. This northern municipality in Stockholm it's a bit special place for planning.
From which aspect? Like more for cars or how do you mean?
Solna has been developed. You can see exactly how it has been developed in different eras. And it seems like for each era, it just adds on a segregated structure that, separates people rather than brings them together in this kind of easy going flow, doing things in the city. And of course, I think Solna is advantaging car drivers.
Seems like many other municipalities still doing it as well.
Yes, but we have to keep in mind that we are pretty much in the center of Stockholm city.
That's true. It's not far away.
So that's a bit surprising, isn't it?
It's also sad, I think, because I how to say, commute here every day. And as you mentioned, it's like these huge, mega, big projects. And then we as individuals struggle so much just to cross the street or just to walk. Like it's 5 minutes from the station to the office, but it turns to be like 10 minutes.
Exactly.
Because you need to go up and down, and then jump and so on. So like I'm imagining, what if a person has like physical challenges or on a wheelchair, or a parent with a like baby stroller, like then it's like no way for them.
Yeah, exactly. My oldest son is disabled and on a wheelchair, and I also have two smaller children, and I think about this all the time. But from a more egoistic perspective, I was a bit early today, so I was planning on, hitting a cafe maybe, having my second cup of morning coffee,
relaxing,
preparing for this talk, maybe, smell the atmosphere of Solna city. And what surprised me, and very few are talking about this, but this is my spawning or my kind of thoughts about what to look at when we are looking at the future of planning, is that in this kind of heavy infrastructure investment, heavy kind of planning atmospheres as Frösunda in Solna, with, for example, the AFRI building and a lot of other office buildings being built, planners are de-investing in the public values of the city. And a very good example of this is that I mean, thousands, at least hundreds of people must walk the way I walked from the commuter train to this office. And there was no cafe or even, place, weather protected place I could sit down and have a chill moment.
No.
Except from indoors in the company buildings.
Yeah, the commercial one.
Yeah, so I had my coffee in your foyer here, which is it's very symptomatic of the planning in like the corporate style planning we have in Sweden and many other places, where imagine AFRI investing in this, or I don't know who owns the building, but the planners here could very easily invest in these planning projects by also at the same time strengthening public values. A cafe is not a hard thing to prepare for. I mean, you need a good facility basically, and entrepreneurs will show up.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a lot of people moving, which is
and also like a good infrastructure for logistics, like for the goods and so on.
But instead, planners have invested in the privatized sphere of the buildings. So even the public activities going on here are forced to happen within the corporate sphere, which excludes a lot of people.
True. We're gonna talk more about these challenges, but let's start with you. You're our storyteller. How would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us about you.
I'm a researcher. I'm also, my background is, I'm an immigrant in Sweden. Me and my brother and my parents, we immigrated from Iran. We lived in Tehran, 1986. So I have been living in Sweden for the most of my life, but I also have an Iranian identity. I speak Persian. Also, my kids, they know Persian, and I'm very emotionally invested in Iran. I grew up in a small city, even you can call it a village even, in Sweden called Mariestad. So that's where I have my elementary schooling years until I was 19. After that, I moved to Gothenburg for the university and studied a political science master. And didn't know what to do with my life. I knew I was socially and politically engaged in different kinds of social movements at the time, around 2005, anti-discrimination, anti-racist movements, but also like ethnic minority organizations, Iranian organizations, and other communities struggling for different social justice values. And in relation to that, the best option that showed up for me was an invitation to join a PhD program at the same department I studied. It's the School of Public Administration in Gothenburg. So I wrote a dissertation there, and I finished the PhD education 2012. And in Gothenburg, I also met my partner, who is from Sollentuna, north of Stockholm. And she always had this vision that we will move back to her home, and I agreed. So love brought me to Stockholm.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. So I live in northern Stockholm, and since 2012 here in Stockholm, I have been working with research and teaching in different places. KTH, Urban and Regional Studies, was the main site for me for the last years. But I've also worked at Mångkulturellt Centrum, that is a research center focusing on multicultural issues in southern Stockholm, Botkyrka kommun, in Fittja. I have also I quit a recent employment in the political science department at Malmö University, and I have a position now as a senior lecturer and associate professor in political science at the Division of Public Administration at Södertörn University.
Wow. Why you quit?
Malmö University.
Yeah.
It was just too far from home, but it was a job I wanted, and I was there for a couple of years.
Okay.
But I succeeded to get a lectureship in public administration in Södertörn. I was very happy about that. It's like winning an Oscar. You people know this. It's very hard.
Okay.
So when you win a permanent position in a Swedish university,
it's big.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
A lot of champagne bottles have been opened and so on.
So what do you work with now? Like, do you have a specific project to work on or no?
I guess one branch of my work is research, and the other branch is teaching.
Yeah.
I will teach. I haven't started yet, but it's courses in public administration. That's the focus. And when it comes to research, I have, like, all my old projects are haunting me still. So I have always different things going on. But I can tell you one exciting thing that I am pretty sure that I will do for the next 6 months is in collaboration with Malmö City.
Yeah.
And the leisure department of Malmö City are concerned that a critical mass of working class youth in marginalized areas are not participating in the subsidized leisure and cultural activities of the city.
Okay.
So around 40%, especially female. So young girls, but also young people living in marginalized areas in Malmö are not participating in associational or other municipal leisure activities, football, dance, and so on. So they want to know why, and they want to know what they can do about it.
Okay.
So we are going to do a social justice oriented policy analysis and see how their subsidies are, in a way, strengthening segregation in the leisure field.
Okay.
And it's very interesting because if you look like wealthy people, they take their kids to football practice or hockey training and these kind of time consuming and also resource consuming activities. While poorer families, they let their kids go to open activities like swimming halls, libraries, youth recreation center, cultural houses.
It's because of the economical aspect?
I think so, because maybe the parents don't have to follow them after a certain age. And also because young people can go there on their own initiative. So it's like a freedom value in going to these more open activities. If you go, you cannot just go to a handball practice. You need some relation with the club. You need to sign up to an association, and for some people it's a money issue, but for some other it's a mental barrier that maybe that is not what they want to do.
Yeah.
And so if you don't start, there's a barrier, right?
Yeah.
While a library is always open for you.
True.
A youth recreation center is always open for you. Still, 40%-ish are not using this, and we are going to investigate
why.
Why.
That's interesting.
So this is like an example of the kind of research I do, which is often placed in collaboration with policymakers and planners. And it's also typical of my research themes, focusing on democracy, planning, participation, equality, social justice issue in relation to existing structures like segregation or ethnic discrimination or racialization and so on.
Yeah, like this is your niche. And I want to ask you like why you started, it's like when you start to study university, like political science, why you became so much interested in this niche and you just continue with it?
I guess it's a sum of different aspects of my life. My parents were revolutionaries from Iran. They struggled for a more socially just and democratic society, and they failed. So their trauma, I think, I have inherited that feeling that the loss of something that could have been great, but still was lost, and at the same time that it is an ongoing struggle to achieve that. It's like in my upraising, this feeling that we cannot give up. Maybe we lost this struggle. There are other struggles. So political and social justice issues has always been like one of my main interests. But also we were poor when we grew up as an immigrant household in this small city. My parents didn't have jobs all the time, and when they had jobs, it wasn't the most well-paid jobs. They were working class or lower middle class teachers, and eventually my mother got an education and started work as a social worker, which of course strengthened her position in society. But my father was unemployed for a very long time, and that affected me because we could not do a lot of things. But also we had, I think, both me and my brother, a sense of not being part of Sweden. While I was 6, my brother was 2 when we arrived, and for us, Iran wasn't really an option. We saw ourselves as Swedish people, and this sense of exclusion, I think, triggered something in me. So when I always thought about social justice issues, for me, racism was a big issue. Discrimination was a big issue. Everything in between, neo-Nazi youth I had to fight with in a schoolyard or the areas we grew up to, having to argue with teachers that maybe my grades, should be valued as much as the Swedish pupils. I felt discriminated. And so on. So when I came to the university, of course, this perspective on politics was my way of seeing society. And what was shocking was that there was other conversations going on in political science and our education, and also with the comrades that I study with and so on. So I understood that there's a problem with different perspectives, and my perspectives also. It's not just because I like a more just society. I also felt injustice in a way that I could not accept a lot of the problem definitions that paved the way for university education. And of course, when I had the chance of choosing my own research project and design, I chose the problem of inequality and non-participation and the problems of democracy as like the main frame to work with. That seemed very natural to me.
Do you see like your career as a revenge for the life you had when you were young?
Yeah, I think every day I'm doing my best to mess with the system that enables inequalities. I think that I see that as a mission. And if I go to bed and think of the day as a day in which I did not do that, that is a bad day. So I always try to struggle. Of course, this is very abstract and general, but I always try to find a way to uplift equality and democracy issues and social justice perspectives in whatever I do and wherever. Also, as an individual, like as a parent, as a friend, as a colleague. That is always in my mind.
Yeah. And like when you mentioned the issue of power, democracy, and policy regarding contemporary urban planning, can you elaborate more? Like what kind of issue or what do you see that we don't see? Or maybe we see, but we are silent about it?
Yeah, for me, the quest for my intellectual project is to envision a new role for the state, for the public organization that is our common resource for achieving the society we want in new ways, in more democratic ways, in ways that makes way for more social justice. And if we look at Sweden, I think most people in the world look at Sweden as a successful example in where the state has been reprogrammed from being basically 150 years ago a dictatorship and a very poor and unjust society to become one of the most democratic and equal countries in the world. And this, of course, has been made possible with several social movements struggling to reprogram the functions of the state in society in ways to accommodate different social interests, but not only the interest of the rich and privileged, but also this compromise between the interest of the working classes and the excluded, and the corporate and business, the capitalist class that owns the main resources of production in society. And this project was about, first, democracy, and second, the welfare state. So democracy was about achieving equal political rights to participate in public affairs. And the welfare state was about creating equal life conditions for all, despite your class of birth, in order to make way for equality in opportunities. And in that sense, Sweden and also other Nordic countries in Europe has developed a social model that has been appreciated in research and also by other countries in relation to, enabling for equality. If you look at Sweden from an equality point of view, you see, example, between men and women, a more equal relationship, but also between the classes. If you're born in a working class family in Sweden, you will have certain rights, political rights, social rights, cultural rights. And these rights enable people to grow despite, the choices of their parents, but also despite bad luck. If you get a disease or if you have an accident, we have, for example, a social care and healthcare system which is obliged to provide for your needs in order for you to stand up again and do your things without being dependent on your ability to pay for these services. And so the welfare state has decommodified social care and health care and also culture and other kind of rights for citizens, which is revolutionary. So when we see young people in Iran dying for these rights, we can have a glimpse of how important it is for people to feel, first of all, that they are accounted for as citizens, but also that they live in a society which will care for them, despite the hazards of life. And of course, but so a criticism towards me is, well, what is your problem? We live in Sweden. This is the best of the world. So what? Yeah. But I mean, Sweden is not a perfect society, and for the social movements that struggled for all these, evolutionary innovations in democracy and social welfare, they dreamt of something more. We have to keep that in mind. They dreamt of full equality, which we have never achieved in Sweden. We were close in the 80s. But since the 80s, Swedish society has become more unequal. And this is a point where research is very clear and accepted also among researchers. Income inequalities in Sweden has been rising 5 times in 40 years, which of course have created a more unequal society. And with these inequalities, we now see the trembling of the democratic system, not only in relation to our last election, where there's a new compromise where the neo-fascist or right-wing populist party, Swedish Democrats, have been very influential in forming the policy program the coming 4 years. But also if we look at how citizens react and think about democracy and equality, we see the return of autocracy, also in Swedish culture. The idea that maybe democracy is not a good thing. Maybe we should have fewer people ruling. Maybe inequalities are good because we, promote efficiencies and growth, and these, there should be some kind of inequalities to push people to work harder and so on. So we see the return of these kind of values and ideas, which are of course very troubling for the future.
Yeah. So like the image we have about Sweden is or the world have about Sweden is a kind of outdated?
I think not outdated, but maybe totally not accurate. Sweden, of course, gives a lot of people the opportunities to grow despite bad luck and the size of the pockets of their parents. But still we can see that racism, inequalities, also gender inequalities are rising in a way that people do not have equal opportunities to flourish equally in Sweden. And we have the fortune here to bring these issues up for debate. And my privilege as a researcher is that I meet a lot of policymakers and I see huge public investments and programs that want to enforce equality, which of course are lacking in other contexts. We don't see these kind of policies, maybe not even in America today, or England, or countries that we also perceive as democratic and equal. So in Sweden, we have, I think, an obligation to raise these issues because so many other people in the world can't. So most people in the world are not living in democracies. Most people in the world are living in autocracies, dictatorships, undemocratic or small democratic regimes. And billions of people in the world are rightless. They don't have rights. They don't have the right to work. They don't have any jobs. They don't have any citizenship rights. But we have that in Sweden. So it's also our obligation to, with our work in different ways, reimagine the world because we have the freedom to do that.
Exactly. We should take the lead, and have it as a responsibility to keep what we have and even go even further. Exactly. As you mentioned, reach the fullest equality.
Yeah. Of course, what does that mean? That is one of our problems to discuss.
Yeah, of course, it's a very broad.
But we have the freedom to discuss that.
Exactly.
So,
now we're talking.
Yeah, let's talk.
Yeah. And if you take us to more urban planning, the physical infrastructure and segregation and other, what do you see? Is it like a cause of the system, people, or planners?
Of course, a combination of these things. Segregation is, from my point of view, a bad, definitely a bad in the city. But we cannot only relate it to how urban planners have been, working. It's a much broader issue than that.
Yeah, because like I listened to you many times, you say segregation is not only the physical infrastructure, it's much more.
No, it's about social separation between different classes, different ethnic groups or racial groups, which why is that a problem? It shouldn't be a problem. Maybe people want to, spend time with the people who are more like themselves, but it becomes a problem when we also see segregation as a symptom, a consequence of inequalities, which also exacerbates inequalities. It makes inequalities even worse by taking away, life chances from the poorest and the low resourceful groups in society. And this is not an issue that has been caused by urban planning.
Okay.
And it's therefore not only.
Yeah.
And therefore it's not either an issue that can be fixed with urban planning. It's much deeper than that. It's a part of our class hierarchies in society, that the rich and the poor and all those in between have different ways of life because of their position in societies, their position in the social order of human interaction at work, in the family, wherever, hierarchizes people and displaces some and privileges other. So we could perhaps see the cities of the late 19th century as non-segregated, but if we look closer, they were still very unequal. Poor people lived in small houses, or even in the apartments of rich people, being their servants. So we could see a spatial proximity and integration, but still, vast inequalities and unfreedoms for the poor. What we have today is another kind of segregation, especially in modern cities, in Sweden and other European cities, where we can see, the clustering of people belonging to the different classes in different specialities of the city. And with immigration and racism, we can also see this class clustering of people, which is, steered with one important factor, and that's income level. That defines the ability you have to get the housing you want. But we see a racialization of this class clustering. So therefore, it's relevant to talk about racial segregation, because if we look at the poor areas, which areas are poor in Sweden? Well, it's the areas that were planned by public sector during the post-war era, which had a use value system for the rent level, negotiated between the tenants association and the landlords, which have kept the rents quite low, but quite also free from market speculation. And these areas were also built for the working class and integrated into the cities with public transport and other kind of social amenities and goods, schools and squares and commercial centers and so on. And today, these, because they have been de-invested for so long, they are the cheapest housing areas. But also, as immigrants have concentrated there, more wealthy, and also which correlates with white households have been moved away. So this is this phenomenon of white flight. So we see the polarization of ethnicity, but if we look deeper, it's also a class segmentation, because it's the low income people that are more or less forced to live in these modern project areas, the Million Program homes, which has the occupation model of rental and rent controlled, not social housing, but public housing. That's the specialty of the Swedish system. We have no social housing, but we have a rent controlled public housing. Still.
Yeah.
It's also shaking in the foundations, but we still have it, which makes rents cheaper, and therefore they are more available for people with lower resources. So other people who can have a loan or can pay a lot more, like 4 times more in rent, they can choose, of course, where to live more easily. But if you're an immigrant, like my parents were an immigrant household, you have no permanent or no privileged position in the hierarchies of the labor market. You have to do maybe the kind of service or manufacturing jobs that other people rather not, with lower incomes and salaries, and also maybe longer commuting time. Then, of course, you have a more stressed life situation, and perhaps you have also quite a few kids, and which is, when we look at what's going on in the social issues in these areas that are vulnerable in our Swedish language, important factors to look at.
So, like, from when I listen to you now talking, segregation is not as how we like generalize it. It's like two societies or communities separated by a highway. It's like much more deeper, because what we see as a planners or usually is like, okay, we have like one area here, one area here. They are not talking to each other because of this highway. So let's solve it and maybe dig down the highway and build a tunnel so maybe people meet, and or so on. You know, like trying to remove the physical barriers.
Yeah, there are a lot of physical barriers, but I mean, Mustafa, you're from Helsingborg. And a lot of immigrants in Helsingborg, they live in the city district called Söder. Which is pretty much in the center of the city. It's not hard to get there.
No.
But still you can feel segregation in the air, right?
True.
So it's not only about the physical structure. And if you look at the American cities, if you look at some British cities, if you look at other Southern European cities, you can see that, well, segregation could be a relation still ongoing in a very proximate and dense environment. And then there are more subtle aspects, right? Like, for example, like which of the buildings here are social housing, and which street has the lowest prices on the food and coffee, or low price consumption spots, and so on. So that's still a separation in space, but it's more subtle. And perhaps you can see that, well, that kind of integration of different classes in space makes some of the negative aspects of segregation less harsh. From the perspective of the poor people, because they still have a proximity to a lot of resources, because more affluent people also live there. But then there could be other factors that exclude people, right? Mental barriers, or even discriminatory laws and procedures on where you can go and so on.
So, like, by connecting two different areas, by like public transportation, opening parks in between, removing the physical barriers, is not going to solve the segregation.
No, because as long as you have areas with the concentration of a certain occupational models, you still will have a clustering in space. So I know this is not a secret that planners are talking about social mixing and how to build in different occupational models. But what happens in Sweden and other places, research is quite clear on this point as well, is that rather than building low income or low cost housing occupation models in richer areas, planners are building or planning more expensive middle class or upper middle class accommodation styles, like small single houses or bostadsrätter, as we say here, or owners, some kind of owner house accommodation in poor areas. And what this creates is a kind of gentrification model of officially dismantling segregation, but not really solving the problem, because life situation for poor people then becomes even more stressed.
Yeah.
Because other rent levels go up, consumption level goes up, and we see then exclusion in space. Yeah.
So we are like pushing the poor people out and out and out.
That's the risk. And if you see, for example, what is happening in Gothenburg and Stockholm with rents going up and the prices for life generally going up, you can see that, outskirt municipalities, which you would not assume is a part of the Stockholm or Gothenburg, labor market or kind of even possibility, has become some of suburban areas where low income people move in order to get housing or to live a life where they can afford. Flynn, for example, or Ale in Gothenburg. You can see these kind of tendencies. So in general, if we also zoom out and look at Sweden, we see the polarization between the urban centers, the cities, and the urban peripheries and the rural areas as exactly part of this stressing process of urbanization, which is not only that, we think about urbanization as something good. People live mostly in cities.
They more possibilities.
They go to universities. They get good jobs. They get closer to social and commercial
services,
arenas and concerts. But the flip side of urbanization is that society is not really built for that, because we have a lot of things we need which are not in the larger cities. We have industries, we have land, we have resources that somebody should take care of. We have also a lot of people that are rooted in other places. And by de-investing or urbanization is kind of like a resource, the pulling out of resources of these areas, which make them more impoverished and stressed, which is like, if you look at spatial peripheries, the segregated or the vulnerable areas in Stockholm City, for example, have a lot in common with cities where I grew up, Mariestad, where we see the exact same de-investments and social problems and political problems emerging as a consequence of urbanization. So we should think about what could just urbanization really mean.
And these, like, all this kind of transitions happen in many years. How do we decode this? Is there a way to solve this and put it back, make it more equal? I know it's going to take like years.
Yeah. I mean,
is it possible, or no, we are going to go even more?
It's a hard issue, which research, of course, cannot give a full answer to. But we can look back in history and see where did we come from? Where we came from, a society where the rural economy was central for the national economy. The peasants were important. They were direct producers of food. The countryside had also other resources. In Sweden, we have forests, we have mines, we have a lot of other industries, which rationally are better placed outside of cities. And these industries and people, living in these communities were in the post-war welfare planning system more taken care of, because we had a Keynesian planning of the economy where the state interfered more directly in the redistribution of resources in order to stimulate the economy to produce the kind of goods wanted, or at least set up by democratic means as objectives of the Swedish state. But now, and of course that planning model was not without its problems. But what has happened now is a change of paradigm to a neoliberal model where not the state, not the democratic institutions, but rather the market institutions and the private corporations steering market competition are uplifted as the main regulators of the distribution of these goods in society. And this is one of the driving forces behind urbanization, because capital needs a spatial fix in order to grow, to accumulate, and to become more stable, at least fictiously stable, like people think it is more stable. Nothing is stable. So by investing large sums of capital in urban space, the economy flourishes in a way, but also becomes more crisis prone in another way. So we see now the unfortunate economical development that people wanting to make money are not making money in manufacturing goods and services. They are making money in buying and selling capital. And this is one of the driving forces laid open in amazing research in contemporary geography, political economic research, saying that financialization of capital is enforcing processes of urbanization unequally. And if we look back and see what have the democratic response to this crisis-prone system been? Well, it's more state and democratically regulated planning system. It's not only about physical planning, where and how should houses and infrastructure be built. It's about economic planning in general. Like, how should we redistribute resources in society? Which cities will have what kind of amenities that the country owns. So right now, the market regulates this more than the state, in my opinion, which enforces social injustices, because in the market, there is only one justice. And that's the justice of the achievement being better than the competitor's achievement. And the better achievement should be rewarded in a market regulated price system. And the surplus value in this trade is the aim, not equality. Right? So the profit is the aim, not other social values. And when the profit is the aim, of course, this could be regarded as efficient and fundamental to economic growth and, well-being, wealth. On the other side, history tells us that if you neglect social values, use values, because people need to do a lot of things where the market is a lousy price setter, is a lousy performer. Everything from taking care of children to schools to other kind of public values, then the market will underachieve. It will concentrate wealth unequally. And this is what we see with the 1% owning more than the 99% in the world, which is also a political problem because, and this is the paradox of democracy and capitalism. We have a democratic system and a universal right for all of us to participate and to say ours and to, be a part of the setting of our common goals. But then when we enter this system, those who can pay for most services, intellectual and thought producing and lobbying services, are actually the ones that get more influence over these common decisions that will affect us all. And this is not a new problem for democracy. This is an ongoing struggle for democracy to manage. How should we equalize influence over policy? And right now, neoliberalism has forced democracy in a kind of hostage situation where those who own the means of production in society, the factories, the money-making business, are setting the agenda. And in relation to other social values, it's a harm. We look at the climate crisis, if we look at the energy crisis, and other things people still need to have resolved, the market regulation system cannot fix this alone.
Mm. And what are you afraid of that's going to happen in Sweden, let's say 30, 50 years? Are we going to continue like this, or are we going to get even worse?
I mean, for my part, I have a very pessimistic, dystopic view of where we are going. And unfortunately, world events are not making me happier or more optimistic. We have a climate crisis that we have notoriously tried but failed to deal with. We are not heading toward, the mitigation targets of carbon emissions and so on. And even if we did, it's not sure that it would be enough. And so the reaction in the world is to turn away from democracy, from popular sovereignty based on values of freedom, equality, solidarity, towards some kind of autocratic, reactionary sense that if we just have a strong ruler protecting our people, which in the world is organized in the Westphalian national state model. So our people becomes our state, not the human race, And so we have the emergence of autocrats and nationalism and autocracy and the diminishing of democratic values, and unfortunately also the strengthening of conservative and sometimes even fascist or proto-fascist ideas about, very elitistic, very male-oriented, hierarchical ideas about the social order. We can see this like immigration rights and human rights for asylum seekers and migrants are right now like the main focus of this, conservative efforts to disentangle democracy. And my fear within, maybe the next decade is that, well, there will be other groups that will be the target. And in the end, the winner will be the 1% and not the 99%. And we saw this unfortunate events folding out in the First and Second World War in the 20th century. So I can't say, and of course I can't be sure that this will never happen again. Maybe it can happen again, that we will have this, ruptures of wars and national competition leading to violence and conflicts between the big nations. But also within the countries, we see class polarization, racial polarization, gender inequality polarization, in where, of course, male and European elites can have more to say about the kind of social system that they prefer, that of course will benefit them and not the 99%.
Yeah. But
this is a bit pessimistic, I'm sorry, but
no, I mean, this is your point of view.
Yeah.
And it's based on what you know, what you study, and how you predict the future as well. But like from urban planning point of view, now we are more like cities heading toward, okay, we are opening up cities, we make them more socialized, people can go out, can meet each other. We're like removing the physical barriers. We're even, integrating people in the decision making, as you know, like doing a lot of dialogues with people and so on. What do you think about this kind of democratizing the process, the urban development process? Is it like the real equal democracy? Like we meet people, hey, what do you think about this? And then
I'm all for it. I'm pro these kind of innovations trying to deepen democracy, even if it's more from an top-down perspective rather than the old narrative of democratization where people come together and they struggle together in big social movements and they occupy squares and buildings and they demand their rights. And then the elite will kind of give up and give them rights and so on. This is another model where the elite says, please come and participate with us. We want good things for you. So of course, I'm curious about this, but I have also always been critical because it does not sound right that the elite, especially with the story I had about where we are heading, where the elite is suddenly saying, hey, you know what, we want to share power with everyone and really we want social justice and equality, but we look outside the window here from your office, we see the exactly opposite thing happening. But I think that we also, from a research and theory point of view, need to understand the paradoxes of the state and the different functions of the state and how we all working with these kind of professional activities are entangled in different kind of struggles. So the state is not monovocal agent, it's a plurivocal agent. The state wants different things, exactly as corporations and other could have a struggle in relation to their aims and focus and so on. And within these struggles, we have pockets of opportunities opening up for social justice efforts, which I think we should embrace, because within these pockets of opportunities, we can see some maybe crucial innovations emerging that could take us forward in the future. So, during the First and the Second World War and all the atrocities going on, people did not stop working on the visions and ideas about a more social, just, and democratic world. You come from a war zone yourself. You fled from there, from Iraq. And, while this was going on, people did not stop being people. People were dreaming about something else. So when we work, we have the power to, in our daily lives, envision another social and political order. I think this is key for hope for all of us who wants another more democratic and just social order. We need to live it day by day. And of course, I have studied different practices within planning, trying to combat segregation, enhance participation. And there's always criticism that I have and can give about both how these processes have been planned, but also their effects, not really meeting up to the objectives. But still, what I see always is a lot of people struggling to enable a more socially just environment and world. And I think that is valuable. So I think definitely that we should promote more innovations for democracy, for equality, for integration, social justice. But we also need to be sober. We should not dream away and imagine that this is the solution. We also need to look at the horizon to try to see the big picture and also do other things.
Can you give us, like, you mentioned that you have some critic about the processes. Can you share with us?
The Swedish model of participatory planning, which is called citizens dialogues. Medborgardialog is a good example where it came from, you can say, an idea nurtured by state agents, researchers, radical planners, politicians, striving to strengthen the ideas of participatory and deliberative democracy. And they managed to build up a policy infrastructure, not any hard laws, but rather soft policies to encourage people to innovate and experiment more with citizens' participation.
Okay.
And
which is good, no?
Very positive, because most municipalities in Sweden, despite of their political affiliations and majority coalitions ruling them, have a policy saying that we strive to deepen democracy. If you look at the world, I said, minority of the world's population do not live in democracies. So majority of people in the world live in dictate. So it's a blessing for us to have politicians that are committed to the democratic ideal. And in line with this policy infrastructure, a soft, encouraging policy infrastructure, we see a lot of initiatives on the local level where professionals, not only planners, but maybe school staff, other kind of public managers, are engaging in trying to adjust planning and service production by the public sector to meet the needs of citizens and also inhabitants in general, which is it's I think very inspiring, and there are also a lot of inspiring examples. But if you look at the consequences of what these practices result to, it's not really what is promised. So these practices, citizen dialogues, invite people to participate and influence and partake in public decision making in different ways. But you cannot really see that this is the effects of the processes, is my argument. I read research, I talk to researchers in different parts of the world where citizen budgets and other kind of planning, participatory planning initiatives are more radical, giving more money, more say to the participants in deciding what is actually going on. While in Sweden, I would say what a citizen dialogue in planning mostly is a preference management system where planners invite citizens to either be informed or to extract information from them in relation to their preferences on whatever, this part of the city, we are going to build it, or this park, or all kinds of issues. Like, what are your preferences? And then the dialogue in basically is like the summing up of different voices and preferences, almost like dream lists that citizens provide. Like, we want this, we want this, we want this. And then the planners are like, yeah, the people. But what they mean is like the people we talk to. And rarely any methods for representative sampling. So mostly like it's quite random people showing up with time, or people the planners target. Like, we want kids, or we want female citizens, or we want whatever.
We select.
Yeah. It's a selection of a voice that the planners are responsible. So it's the planners' people. It's the planners' public. And these voices are mostly used as a consultative kind of value in the planning process. For the participants, it's not really clear, like, how will you meet my voice here, or how can I?
So it's like it's not like a democratic. We still like select what we want to show and what we want to listen to.
Well, it depends on what you mean with democracy. Democracy is popular sovereignty. The people decides. I think I have found very few citizen dialogues in planning where the participants can actually decide on something that then will be produced in some kind of city.
Yeah.
There's a long step between the dialogue and the production of the city.
Many years also.
But there are other democratic values. So one of the main ideals of participatory democracy is that people get to learn how to participate. And with this learning, they also empower themselves and get able to critically reflect on who they are and what society is. They learn about society, and with this wisdom and knowledge, they can do other things. So in a democracy, citizens should be knowledgeable enough to understand what is going on. So that is a democratic value. And I can see that this value is realized in the citizens' dialogue, because citizens taking part in 1 or 2 or 3 evenings or weekends discussing planning issues with planners and other citizens, maybe even politicians, they get to know these system agents, these planners, and who they are and what they want, and how are you talking about my area, and what is really going on in planning, why are they talking about sustainability, and what do they mean, and what is this, barnkonsekvensanalys. And so people get to know politics in a more concrete way. And with this wisdom, they can do other things. Also, every citizen dialogue is also like a mini public. It's a small public place opened up. And all publics have a democratic value where people interact. They see each other in a new light. They see, different values, maybe obscure to them in their private life. And with this kind of, if you have thousands of these kind of mini publics, you open up a sphere of participation, which I can see could have values in the future. But of course, the danger is that these publics are owned and controlled by planners and other system agents, consultants, for example, or politicians wanting to have a sort of voice derived from the people. And so on. So there are dangers which I think we should be aware of. But I would say that in all days of the week, we should have more publics rather than fewer publics.
Yeah. And when I listened to you, you mentioned that how we should turn it from a monologue to a dialogue. What steps or what should we think about?
I think the most important step further for citizens' dialogue and public participation in general is to realize a deliberative ideal, which was the point behind these kind of democratic innovations, in part at least. The deliberative ideal says that, a problem that we have in democracy is that the elites decide what is right and what is wrong, and that the system of power and money, capitalism and the state, forces people to become instrumental in their social interactions. You're a citizen, but you want to win. You want to beat the other guy. You want a better job. You want your party to win. You want your organization to have, its policy issues winning. And this kind of system distorts other values that, as a humans, we have as well. For example, communicative values, trying to understand each other. Like, who are you, Mustafa, and what am I doing here? And how can we both win from this kind of podcast interaction? I'm not trying to win over you here.
But together.
Yeah, we are trying to, understand each other.
Yeah.
And this is also how we behave with friends, with family, hopefully, with colleagues, hopefully. This is a part of us.
Yeah.
So Jürgen Habermas, which was one of the big thinkers behind this deliberative ideal of democracy, said that if we have no places in society where this communicative ideal can be realized and informing policy making, we only have this instrumentalist, egoistic perspectives infused, and this will impoverish democracy. Then we will have, the winners get it all system. So the deliberative ideal says that if you encourage policymaking by encouraging more deliberative public, in where ideals of reciprocity, understanding, and argumentation rather than an ambition to win over the other. Trying to understand the other's point of view, trying to make an argument to rationally, criticize or see it from another point of view. And without kind of power structures here, as equally as possible, trying to achieve a common good. Like, what is our best solution here? Given who you are, who I am, who we are. How can we understand, how can we come to a decision where we feel that this is a solution that benefits us all? If we have this kind of ideal integrated within what we call a citizen dialogue, it's even called a dialogue, we would have planners, or we would have citizens sitting with each other, not only making a dream list of what they want, but forcing them to listen to the other person and say something about, well, I want this, you want that. How should we resolve this? But in the citizen dialogues, people are not encouraged to make decisions together. It's rather these dream lists.
Yeah, like I come and I say what I want, then goodbye.
And then you leave. And maybe after this meeting, you will understand how stupid all other people are and how smart you really are, because you're right. But I mean, imagine if the planner could have this role. We know that all of you are different, but you know what? We are going to do this, and this is an opportunity for us to agree upon the common good. And we won't decide what the common good is. You have to decide, and you have to discuss until you have found a way that accommodates your differences, your conflicts. It might not be perfect, but this is the ideal that will steer this process. Imagine that, Mustafa. What kind of processes would we have? First, we would have chaos, of course, because
in the beginning, it's only in the
society is so polarized. Elderly men in their 60s plus with young teenagers in their 70s from different areas with different life ambitions, having to decide on how the front door of the AFRI building will be, designed is not an easy thing. But my argument is that this is happening in participatory planning processes in different parts of the world, in India, in Brazil, in North America, in Southern Europe, even in Africa. We can see examples where the deliberative ideal have been realized in public decision making, both in experiments, but also in real life decision making on real complex issues. And researchers argue that if you do it this way, the probability of enhancing social justice and deepening democracy in unequal societies like India and Brazil is still possible. So my argument is that if participatory planning in Brazil achieved this, if Garam Sabhas, the village councils in India, the largest deliberative institution in the world, where 800 million yearly deliberate for people in villages around complex planning issues, if they succeed, of course we could succeed in Sweden if our ambitions would be deliberative. So my criticism is that we have a participatory speaking planning public, but they are not living up to this ideal in practice.
And this is a responsibility of planners or citizens, or both?
I would say it's mainly the policymakers. The politicians is the main agents here. and that's also where the support for this deliberative and participatory ideal is lacking today. There's a lot of lip service. I mean, who would go out there in a democracy and say, we do not really want people to participate? No, everybody would go out there and say, we want people to participate. And therefore we have a participatory policy. We have a citizen, we have hundreds of citizen dialogues. So that is a good thing. But planners should be really aware of what they are engaging in, because most of the problems of the processes I have studied is that the politicians say that they want deliberations, but in practice, they do not really want it. So the planners are also taken hostage here by a paradoxical policy. But I think the planners as intellectuals, can influence this idea of participation as something more than is happening today. And I get critical when I hear planners talk about citizen dialogues as some kind of market investigation of people's preferences, or some kind of inquiry on CAT, where you send out a questionnaire where people can just add, fill in boxes of, I like this a lot, I don't like this a lot. So think about the deliberative ideal. The point with the deliberative democracy ideal is that people's preferences are not written in stone. They are a result of complex social processes, discourses in society, media, norms, values. The point is not only to measure people's preferences. That's not democracy. Democracy is about something else. It's to together transform preferences in line with social justice values. That would be my argument.
And this is very interesting, and I'm very inspired now actually for my then next coming processes. It's also like a challenge because you're in between. I believe as a planners, we have a mission to make cities for people and also by people. At the same time, they are not the owner of the land. They are not the policymaker, but they are like one of the players to decide as well. So here comes like how to find the balance without pushing somebody under the table and not listening to it.
Of course, an argument would be that in the representative democratic system, we have people have an opportunity to engage in elections and in parties and run for office and be elected, and that's the way we should do things. But this is an unequal institution. We know this. The abilities to participate in the channels of representative democracies are not equal. So therefore, if you only hide behind this system, you will program in inequalities into all planning processes.
Yeah, true. And before we move to the next section of this episode, it's going to be more about you. The last question here is, what should we as urban planners stop doing?
Stop being idiots. And with idiots, I don't mean talentless or lesser intellectual. I mean egoistic figures working only for self-interested motive. So this is part of the problems of bureaucracy, because the terms of engagement in bureaucracy is that you get a prescribed role in an organization and you have to fulfill this. And if you are, if you work good, you get incentives and you get, good things coming to you, higher salary, better job, more influence. And if you look at how the political economy looks now, with great injustices institutionalized in both public and private planning agencies, I think the planner's role should be to always keep in mind what would be the public value here, and not only my self-interest.
Or my organization.
Or exactly. How I don't want to win, all the time. I also want to understand and see that, the beauty of the city is that the city is a social commodity, not a private commodity. It's not a thing that I want to control or I should control as a planner. It's something that I need to understand. And that's why I like the label of this podcast. I mean, people are the city, and if you really do not, if you're not interested in people, then basically you're not interested in the city. You're interested in something else. So a people-oriented, public, value, professional, idea should be motivating all planners, and the opposite is something that you should not do.
Very interesting. So what makes you happy in your city?
I think when I feel happy is when I feel I'm part of something, a community, which is of course a clustering of people. So I think what made Stockholm city so interesting for me was the existence and the presence of a community that I identified with people sharing my life ambitions and ideas. I identified it, and I also saw like concrete ways of being part of this community.
More like active.
Yeah, like I did not only know about the people, I actually met them.
Yeah.
And we met other people, and suddenly we started to talk about ourselves as a we. And if there's a we, there's a them. So there's a struggle. We want to win, but still, this communal idea, the city makes that possible. And of course, the larger cities make that possible more.
More chances, more people.
Because people specialize, and there are more subcultures and so on. So that's the great value of the city, and the city as a social commodity really creates wealth in a mesmerizing way. Not only money kind of wealth, but also other kind of wealth that people need to flourish, to grow, to realize themselves. Everything from ideas to cultures to things to do, things to practice, environments, which I think I love this about the cities.
Yeah. And what makes Nazem sad in the city?
I think it's all the parts of the city that stops this, realization of this communal idea. How cities are being, polarized, how cities are being used by the wealthy and the rich and the powerful to benefit and privilege their interests, by also taking away a lot of benefits from other people, trying to shutting down the true functioning of the city. The city is a space of freedom, where you can, where you should be able to realize yourselves, your beliefs in respect and solidarity with others. I see sometimes, the way, for example, the city privileges automobility. It's not a people. It's not like a city designed not for people. It's people drive cars as well.
Yeah.
But certain people drive cars.
Exactly.
You must afford a car. You must force the government to build a lot of roads in order to have the freedom in a car. And this creates a structure where you polarize people, especially at the same time where that commuting in a city is as important as with public transport as an elevator in a building, because that's the way it is. And you see that, I mean, imagine if you would enter your office building or your apartment building and somebody would charge you for the elevator. So this is the kind of obstructions of freedom that we have in the city, which makes them, I think, more democratic, less democratic.
Less democratic, yeah. And Nazem, if you get $1 million, it's like 10 million crown, and you are allowed to invest it more in urban planning projects. In what will you invest? What kind of project?
Wow,
Good money.
Yeah, it's good money. I would definitely first identify and do like a knowledge process and see what in which area of the city is there like a clear absence of a public space that people are suffering from.
Yeah.
It could be a library. It could just be somewhere where people can sit indoors and have a chat or a coffee, cheap coffee, or somewhere where people can dance and sing or practice whatever they like, gym or whatever. I would see like where do we need a public space, and then after identifying this place, I would invest in a new kind of prototype for the future of public space in a culture house, a social activity house. Call it what you want. Maybe I would call it a people's house.
People's.
Yeah. With some kind of values that everybody can come in here and do what they want as long as they respect others and in solidarity and so on. But I would also program this space for certain activities like dance and joy and music and practicing, but also loose tie kind of activities, just walking around, maybe watching art, having a coffee, having a cheap nice meal, or maybe arranging a big party, a wedding. I would also play some kind of knowledge institution in there.
Yeah.
Maybe a university, or at least the public aspect of some university or some other kind of school system, so that people also go here to do more focused things.
Yeah.
Maybe a library would be good to have here. And also a rich environment for small children's free play, I think is central for all communal activities. Where you, if you're in a city where you see children play, you will have a public space around it.
Exactly.
What is troubling when you go into a city and you don't see any children play, then you have a problem with publics in this city.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a sign. And if you can decide to be something else than yourself as a human, you can choose anything. What will you be and why?
Apple tree.
Apple tree?
Yeah.
Why?
Solid, communal, regular in providing for public goods and services, but also somebody who needs to be taken care of and live in a symbiotic relation with its close and also abstract ecosystems.
Yeah.
I think I would like to be an apple tree. I'm also very fond of apples. I produce my own cider at home.
You do that?
Yeah, I have apple trees. I try to take care of them. And with the fruits, I press them to juice and I ferment them to delicious cider.
That's nice.
So that's also my personal hobby.
Do you sell them?
Soon, maybe. Yeah.
Soon, huh?
Yeah.
After this podcast.
Yeah, maybe.
You should give a promotion code discount for
this.
this.
Yeah, watch out for the cider house. It will soon be in a Systembolaget shelf near you.
And like now you're doing this career and you're very ambitious. You're very honest in your talk. You're not hiding your agenda. You're very bold as well. And you, as you mentioned, you try like to shake the system. So let's say in hundreds years from now, when people gonna Google your name, what do you want them to say about you or to hear about you? Like when they see your name?
First of all, I would be happy if there is someone left in the world in 100 years to be able to do that. This is my angst at the moment. And of course, I hope that when, my children's children, when they Google my name, they will see somebody who did his or her best to try to stop the destruction, mass scale destruction of our life systems as of now with the climate crisis and all. I think this is not only something that I want or dream about. This is something I feel that I have to do. And of course, I would be very ashamed of myself if the remnants of the human race would Google, the intellectuals of Stockholm City, for example. It's not that I'm a great intellectual. There are thousands of people out there, but I'm a small piece of the puzzle in this intellectual debates. If we would, close our eyes or be quiet about our challenges right now, our proven evidence-based challenges with the climate crisis, that is unthinkable for me. I mean, I have to do everything I can to make sure that future generations can have a flourishing life, have a life on this earth. And my part of this is to strive for a more and deep and democratic system, because I think whatever we envision, we need to have an idea of the procedures that we are going to decide how to strategize and move forward. And democracy for me is the way forward.
And I want to ask you a question, because you do studies, like you read a lot of papers and so on. At the same time, you have a family, you have kids. Is it true that like working or doing research takes a lot of time, and maybe taking also time of your private life? How is your work-life balance?
I would say this is an ongoing struggle. I recently come back from a burnt out period where I obviously could not manage this stress of balancing, activities that gives me energy and activities that take energy away from me. I was in balance. And I think for me is to not be instrumental in my lifestyle, not to always do things to win over others, but rather to, have a more communicative ideal that I need to understand others in relation to my own ambitions. Otherwise, the result is that I will, take energy away from other people, my closest, my kids and my partner, my family and friends. I feel that I need to not to do that. I need to be equal in my lifestyle at home. And a price for that is, of course, that I cannot be the researcher that I want, because it takes a lot of time. If you work 6 to 8 hours a day with a lot of commuting, and you need to travel, you need to meet people, you need to struggle to get a position, to get research funding, to get to try to survive the increasing pressures of teaching, which has gone through major reforms, and teachers have to produce a lot of teaching, a lot for their teaching hours, a lot more than a few decades before, which is very stressful. Academic life is an impossibility for most people, and I can also see how it damages a lot of people. But I try to think that I cannot be the best at what I do. It's good enough for me to be just good enough to live up to my ambitions, and not to sacrifice love and friendship and these kind of social and especially ideals that are important for me to be like a social justice oriented thinking and doing citizen. Not to sacrifice these values just because I want to have the best professional career. That is what I am struggling with.
So what is your winning card here to separate or for balancing? What is the key?
I think trying to reasoning with my family and my friends and my colleagues about these troubles, trying to have a reasoning attitude, like there's not one solution to everything, but if you are reasoning and reasoning minded, at least you can try to understand the other, and therefore not to be destructively competitive. even at home, for example, to try to win an hour here or an hour there. Try to be like generous about the communal values of being at home a lot, and sharing domestic work, and also having time for the other pleasures of life. Come on, we have food, we have wine, we have ciders, we have trees, we have gardens, we have people, culture, we have all these things which maybe in our professional life we see them as sidetracks, but for me it's like to try to see these things as these are the main enjoyments of life. And of course I'm passionate about my job, but my job is still something I need to do in order to provide for myself and my family. So I try to think like this. And of course, in my social vision, I think we would not work this much that we have to do. We would work maybe 4 hours a day, and with our other hours, we would fulfill our citizens' obligations. And part of that is also taking care of our environment. It's not only professionally. I mean, privately, we have to take care of our environment. We cannot dream of a leisure activity being flying to New York every weekend. We cannot have these kind of ambitions. They are not sustainable. We need to have other visions, and I think we are capable of that. But the power money system kind of draws us away from that.
Thanks for sharing. And now we are in the last section, and I have only 2 questions for you. First one is gonna be you giving 3 takeaway messages for our listeners.
Democracy is worth dying for. People are dying for democracy all around the world. So try to appreciate the systems that we have in Sweden. It's not about defending them. We need to advance them. And be realistic. Always demand the impossible. Always demand the impossible. If we have no people demanding the impossible, we will not move. We always need a horizon of the impossible in order to dream of a better world. That's it.
And the last question is going to be you asking it to us. So now it's your turn to ask me and the listener.
How should we save our planet?
This is the most important question. So Nazem, I'm very happy to talk to you, and I'm very grateful that you give your time to inspire us and to share your knowledge with us. So thank you so much for coming, and I'm looking really forward to talk more about the more interesting research you do and projects you do in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. Thanks for the invitation.